So last week we spoke a little bit about the concept of feeling the pain and the suffering of our fellow Jew, and we discussed how if you trace the history of Hashem's choice of Moshe Rabbeinu to be our leader, it really came from the fact that Hashem saw that Moshe exhibited feelings towards his fellow Jew. It says in the Torah, "Yar b'sivosam," that he was nasan eino b'libo lios meitzer aleihim, that when Klal Yisrael was suffering in Egypt and subjected to backbreaking labor, Moshe Rabbeinu was in the palace of Paro. He didn't just sit there in the comfort of the palace. He actually went out and he went to see and feel their pain and their suffering. And the Medrash told us that Moshe Rabbeinu actually picked up the bricks for his own, and he enabled himself to put himself in their shoes. So this week we're going to try to figure out some ideas, perhaps how we can develop those thoughts and feelings towards our fellow Jew. So just last week, I think it was the beginning of this week, I was looking on Yeshiva World News, and I saw a headline that somebody was driving towards a convention in Baltimore, and there was a terrible ice storm in the area, and he was a passenger, and the car got into an accident, and he passed away. And then, a day later, you see that there were 10 kids. So, I was reading it, and it hits you a little bit, but unfortunately, we're very desensitized, and we tend to view it as a news information. So I remember that it was on Tuesday that, I saw the name, I'm trying to think about the name, and it didn't ring a bell. And then on Tuesday, I got a message from someone that I knew the guy. So I was racking my brain. I remember this guy. And then I was on Thursday that I was talking to someone from Chofetz Chaim in Queens, and he was telling me that this man had 2 children, 2 of his 10 children, in yeshiva. And then it hit me about 2 years prior to the accident. I had a conversation on the phone with this guy. He was in the credit card processing business, and I was involved in a non-for-profit, and he wanted to know if we needed his services of the credit. He has the Fidelity credit card processing. And then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. So, if you think about what happened, when you're distant from it and you feel like it's a tragedy, it's terrible, it's very hard to get those feelings going and to really put your heart and your mind into another person's shoes. But when it gets a little closer to home and you start tracing, the person's 2 of his 10 children, and then it gets closer to home, and then the feelings are there more. So really, if we think about it, any tragedy that happens in any Jewish family anywhere in the world is our brothers and our sisters. It's us. The connectivity that exists between a Jew and another Jew is so powerful and so strong. They're all our brothers, they're all our sisters. So part of what needs to happen in order to be able to feel is to connect ourselves to that person. The person can be in a different country, the person can be many, many millions of miles away from us, but at the end of the day, a Jew is a Jew. And any tragedy that befalls a Jewish person and a Jewish home is something that we have to realize that as our brothers and our sisters, that's like someone that you know. So obviously, when it's really someone that you know and you have a relationship with, it's a lot easier to connect to those feelings. But if we take a moment to view the fact that we all, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lezeh, every Jew is an Arev, is a guarantor for each other. It affects halacha. Someone that needs a bracha, let's say Kiddush, even if you already made Kiddush, the halacha is that you're allowed to make Kiddush for that person because you're responsible for that other person. That's the type of relationship that exists in every Jew to a Jew. And therefore, any tsar that befalls another member of the Jewish nation is really something that is our responsibility. Like I just heard a story today. Somebody was in downtown Ottawa, and he was was a Jewish boy, homeless, and someone found out about it in New York, and he said, we got to help this boy. So we really got to help this boy. So they looked into it, but there's borders. So it was a wealthy man. He's like, borders. When it comes to a Jew, is there such a thing as borders? A border, we go to in Canada and in New York, there should be something that gets in the way, a little border. We'll pass that bridge when we get there. The idea is that when the Jew is affected, it really affects everybody. It's us, it's our brothers, it's our sisters. We see the Gemara in Bava Metzia illustrates how Hashem, to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the compiler of the Mishnayos, he saw an animal going on its way to be slaughtered. And he saw the animal, so to speak, I guess he was able to see the fear in the animal. The animal, I guess, was able to sense that it was headed towards being shechted. And he saw the fear in the animal. The animal was hesitant, so to speak. So Rabbi told the animal, and made it off, not to the animal, made a remark, like, this is what you're created for, like, just go. And Hashem gave him, said, you're not a rachamim, that v'lo kamerachim, you're not being merachim on my creations, so I'm going to bring upon you Yisurin. And he had a terrible toothache. And it was for a very long time that he suffered from this toothache, for I think 18 years, that he suffered from this, 13 years that he suffered from this toothache, until he witnessed, 13 years later, he witnessed his help in the house was sweeping and came across a mice or a rat, and he said, just don't sweep it out, leave it be. And Hashem said, look, you now you develop that feeling of rachamim, now you develop that feeling of mercifulness, so now I can take away your pain, I can take away your suffering. So if you put it into perspective, it was an animal. It was an offhand remark. Everyone knows that when you eat meat, that it came from a live animal. It wasn't even a human being that we're talking about. You could imagine Yehuda Nasi, the greatest, one of the greatest Tanaim, having a toothache, even as great as he is, it probably impaired his learning on some level. It probably took away from his ability to fully function on some level, on a slight level, but the fact that was Hashem deemed it worthwhile that he suffered through such pain for so many years, because he didn't exhibit the feeling of rachamim, of mercifulness, even when it comes to just a regular animal, just underscores for us how much in Hashem's eyes he views the responsibility that is upon every human to feel, even for animals. So how much more so to feel for another human being. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that, which is something that is very powerful for anyone that's going through any difficult times. It says, Amar Meir Bizman she'adam mitzta'er, when a person's in pain, Shechina Mahomer. What does Hashem say? And the background of this Mishnah in Sanhedrin is discussing when somebody was Chayav Misa through Bezdin, and the person is being hung after the Bezdin killed him, and obviously the person underwent a painful situation, but he deserved it. The psak was that he was Chayav Misa, and Bezdin carried out that psak. And Meir says, what is the Shechina? What is God saying at that moment, at that time? So the Mishnah says, Meir says, Kabayachal chalma mi roshi kalmi mizori. Says, my arms are heavy, my head is heavy. In other words, Hashem says, I'm in such pain that my arms are heavy, my head is heavy. So can you imagine if Hashem, the Mishnah says, if Hashem is in such pain on the blood of Risham, of wicked people that spill, how much more so on the blood of tzaddikim, on the blood of righteous people. Here we have a murderer, someone that was Chayav Misa. And Hashem at that time, what's the Shekhinah saying? The Shekhinah is saying, Kalni miroshi, kalni mizrori. My arms are heavy from the pain, from the suffering. So when you take a look at that from the vantage point of someone that's suffering, it's a very empowering feeling. Hashem is there with you, feeling your pain. He's relating to that pain. We brought out last time, the Rashi and Mishpatim tells us that at the time of Har Sinai, they saw that when they saw Hashem, that's the time they were able to see some level of Hashem, there was a livnus hasaper, there was a sapphire stone by the kisei hakavod, by the chair of God. And the people asked, what is that? And what it was that Hashem placed a brick during the entire time that Klal Yisrael was in Shibim Mitzrayim, was enslaved in Egypt. Hashem placed a brick. There was a lot of that backbreaking labor that they went through, were building bricks and buildings, etc. And Hashem placed a brick by his chair in order to be able to feel, so to speak, if you're talking in terms of Hashem, but Hashem teaching us that to feel their situation. He put a brick there that he could relate to it, that he could feel it more. At the time that the Torah was being given, that brick was still remained by Hashem's kisei. We pointed out that the Mishnah, Mesechus always tells us that one of the 48 ways that Torah is koneh is by nosi ba'ol imchavero. It's feeling the yoke and the pain of your friend. Why is that a prerequisite for Kinyan HaTorah, to acquire Torah? Because Torah is not a science. It's not a subject. Torah is Hashem talking to you through Torah, and it's changing you, it transforms you, and therefore, in order to be able to acquire Torah, you have to change yourself. You have to be Baal Midos in order to have Torah, and therefore, somebody that's Nosei V'Olam Chavero is someone that's worthy of being Koneh Torah. That's perhaps why at that time the Livnus Hasaper was there. So Hashem is saying, look, if you're Nosei V'Olam Chavero, then this Torah that I'm giving you now, then you can be Koneh this Torah, you can acquire this Torah. So the idea of the person that's going through the situation to realize that you're not alone, you're not on your own. It's Hashem that's there with you. And He feels your pain, He feels your suffering. And when you realize that, the Torah tells us, Ger v'yosem v'amana lo sa'amen, that a ger, a convert, or a yosem, an offering, or an almana, or a widow, lo sa'amen, you cannot oppress. So it's in lav in the Torah. It's besides for the regular lav that exists ben adam chaver when a person insults someone else or offends them, etc. There's a specific lav, the ger v'yosem v'amana lo sa'amen. So a lot of the Rishonim understand that Hashem's telling you better watch out, because the people that are inside and they cry, they realize that they depend only on me, only on God, and therefore when they cry out, their cry is heard. I hear it quicker. I hear it. It's an express lane. So if you mess with them, you better watch out for yourself, because Hashem's saying that Gabriel and they have an express lane to my ear, because since they're going through something and it's difficult for them, they're able to relate and develop their relationship with Hashem easier than someone who's comfortable. And you're very comfortable, and the world seems to be going very well for you. So you a little bit, you daven, you cry out to Hashem, but in the back of your mind, everything's okay by me. So you don't have that same feeling of this is the only avenue of escape is my tefillah, it's my davening. But someone that doesn't have that and needs the tzedakah, the crying out to Hashem, it's a natural response of Hashem. Lo sa'amen, because they're going to have my ear, and when they have my ear, there's no telling what can happen when I listen. It's really, that's what's expressed in these parshios that we're in the middle of, in Shemos, that what got Hashem to enlist the services of Moshe, it's because Hashem heard their tzedakah, Hashem heard their cry. And because Hashem heard their tzedakah, that's what forced Hashem, so to speak, to leave the Kisei Shel Din and go to the Kisei Shel Rachamim and enable the Geula, the redemption. If without the tzedakah, then there wouldn't have been any Yitzias Mitzrayim. It's because Hashem heard the tzedakah of Klal Yisrael that therefore Hashem was able to, so to speak, move ahead with the process of taking out Klal Yisrael from Mitzrayim. We find that in the Medrash tells us that in reference to Avram and Yaakov and Shmuel and all the times that Hashem refers to them in a double name, Hashem cries out Avraham, Avraham. There's a break. There's a little bit of a break in between Avram and Avraham. Yaakov. There's a little bit of a break. Hashem also did it to Shmuel. Usually Rashi comments whenever Hashem refers in the name twice. It's out of Ava. It's out of love. But there's always a slight break in between each name. When it comes to Hashem calling out Moshe by the burning bush, it says Moshe without a break. So the Medrash asks why? Why is there no break in between Moshe and Moshe? Why is it just Moshe without a stop, without a break? He gives a mashal, gives an analogy, the Adam Shnitin Allah Masay Gadol. If you have a very big load upon you, and you're Kori, Ploni, Krovi, Prokmi Alai Masay said, you just call out, and you keep on calling. Come help me, take my load off of me. So Hashem at that time, even though the Jewish people deserved obviously the Shibud Mitzrayim, but Hashem at that time had felt that he had a Matzah Gadol, he had a big load on his shoulders. And when he called out Moshe, it was different than Avram, and Yaakov, and Shmuel. It was a call out of help. I need your services, I need you. My people are suffering. And Hashem walked around as if there was a load on his shoulders. So again, the feeling of, we're not in here, we're not going through it alone. When a person is going through a difficult situation, Hashem is there with them. And He's closer to you, and He's there with you. So, from the vantage point of the person that's not suffering, if you focus on how much Hashem feels for that person, and we're supposed to mimic the ways of God, we're supposed to follow in His ways, walk in the ways of God. So when someone's going through something, if Hashem Kavayachol, his hands feel heavy, and his head is hurt from the pain, and he feels like he has a tremendous load on his shoulders, even for Russia, then a little bit we should try to emulate in those ways of God and muster up those feelings for another person. How far do we have to go? I just saw the Shmuel Orbach in the Sefer says that he heard, I guess from his father, that the Chofetz Chaim said that he wasn't able to read newspapers. He felt it was important for him to know what was going on in the world, but he found it very difficult to read a newspaper. So the Chofetz Chaim explained, because when he read the newspaper, even just reading about, it wasn't a Jewish newspaper, even just reading about all the tragedies that were going on in the world, it pained him too much, it hurt him. He couldn't do it. So the Chofetz Chaim was conditioned in a way that he was able to sense and feel the hurt of any human. Like we saw Rabbi with the animal, the Chofetz Chaim was able to do it with any human. So, now we're more desensitized and it's very difficult unless it really hits home, but at least to focus on, but with another Jew, at least start with the Jews. There's enough anti-Semitism in the world, we don't need more within the Jewish nation. So at least with a Jew, the achdus and the togetherness of every Jew and the power, no matter what type of Jew and the differences between us, at the end of the day, we're all there in Har Sinai, and Hashem, we're all there. We all have one Hashem, one God, and we're all in it together. And if it's your brother, it's your sister. So to focus on that, as we pointed out last time, the Medrash asks, and I just saw this Shabbos, the Ron Color brings out the same point. The Ron Color brings out that the Medrash asks, how is it possible for somebody to not take revenge on someone else? It's very, when it says Hashem describes revenge as sweeter than honey. Someone hurts you, you want to get them back. So you deceive ways to get revenge, to take revenge. So the Yerushalmi tells us the only way to do it is by realizing, and gives the following analogy. If you had a knife in your hand and you were cutting a vegetable, and that knife cut your left hand, you have the knife and you cut your right hand, are you going to take revenge on your left hand with your right hand? Of course not. It's yourself. So Yerushalmi is telling us that's a Jew to a Jew. It's your third hand. It's another hand. How do you take revenge? But if that's what's necessary to not transgress a law in the Torah, Rashi tells us that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is the Trayona Mabrios. God doesn't give us commandments that we're not capable of fulfilling. That means it has to be bedrocked and conditioned within the neshama, that we have the ability to muster up those feelings of, this is my third hand. I would never take a knife and cut my left hand, cut my right hand, because that's crazy, it's me. So if Hashem says that's the only way to not transgress, lo sikim lo siter, that means bedrock within every Jewish neshama is that ability to bring out those feelings for another person. It's there. It's covered up, there's many layers that block us from feeling it. But when we realize that we have those feelings bedrock within us, it's something that can be empowering and enable us to work towards a little bit. If you think about it, throughout the entire time that we daven, we're always if you look at the middle brachos of Shemona Esrei, we're davening for the Gula, we're davening for Refuah, we're davening for Parnasa, all the bakashas, all the requests that we ask of Hashem, they're all said in plural. We're not just asking for ourselves, we're asking for other people. So throughout the davening, throughout every time that we do anything, it's always in plural. All the requests, all the bakashas from Hashem. Now, Shana Esrei is a very difficult task. It's mitzvahs and Hashem Amada, we do it by route. But if you stop for a second and focus, it's asking for everybody, anyone that's sick. It's collective. The fact that we have set up by Lanchi Knesset Gedola a system that if we just focus on what they set up for us, then we can really bring out those feelings. Can you imagine you're sitting here davening for other people? Who am I? What am I? I can just daven for other people? Yeah, any time that there's a tefillah that's said, the power of that tefillah is immeasurable. We can't imagine the force that it has. And the fact that Chazal put into place a system that the tefillah said for us asking for other people, so that's a way in which if we focus, we can develop feelings for other people. Because I'm asking on behalf of everybody else that any illness in the world should be cured. So that means that we should stop and think at that time. Other people, what they're going through, if they're sick, and then our tefillah, it's more of an empowering feeling. So it's not that we don't have the opportunities in place. They're there 3 times a day. If we just focus and realize, like, look, here you are, and you're davening for the rest of the world. And that's something that could help us, perhaps, bring out some feelings that we have towards other people. The Gemara in Brachos tells us, anyone that has the ability to mevakish rachamim on his friend, ve'enum mevakish, and doesn't request, doesn't ask, it's nikr chote. It's called a sinner. So the Gemara is telling us that if you have the ability to stop and ask Hashem for that the other person can have for the other person to have an easier situation, and you don't take advantage of that opportunity, you're called a chote, you're called a sinner. You didn't hurt the person, you didn't insult the person, you didn't put the person in that situation. But if you are aware of the situation and you have the ability to mevakesh rachamim, to ask Hashem to have rachamim on this person, and you didn't do it, the Gemara is saying you're nikra chote. Again, the awesome responsibility that rests upon a Jewish person's shoulders if they're aware of a situation that needs Hashem's rachamim. That it's not that you caused it, but you're not asking rachamim. That's nikra chote. There's actually a lot in the Torah. The Torah tells us in Dvarim, Amin says the Vavcha Sikvos is Yodcha. The Shari Tshuva, the way he understands it, is don't harden your heart and don't close your hands. He says that the Torah is cautioning us against being achzari, against cruelty, against being cruel. It says, what does it mean? It means that look at Hashem. Look how Hashem is so merciful. And you call merachim al abrios, merachim al ben hashemayim. The kol she'einu merachim al abrios, ein merachim al ben hashemayim. He cites as a manifestation of what is expected because the Torah says lo sa'amitz. If somebody has mercifulness towards Hashem's creations, then Hashem will reciprocate and have mercy upon us. Anyone that's not merachim al abrios, ein merachim al ben hashemayim, then Hashem won't have mercy upon us from Shemayim. He says that that's the midah of rachamim that's expected because of the lav los amis the vavcha los sikvot is yotcha. The Or Yecheskel Levenstein says, if you take a look at the word achzorius, what does it say? Achzorius has the word zar in it. It's a stranger. So he says the root of cruelty comes from the fact that we view someone as a stranger. If someone's a stranger to us, so then it's much harder to react, it's much harder to feel. The closer it is, the closer to home it is, the much easier it is to feel. And even that, unfortunately, over time, wears off. But he points out that the root of achzorius comes from the fact that it's a zar, it's a stranger. So he says, we're chayiv lahargish es chaveru k'shem shemargish es atzmo. The midah of ve'ahavtu erecha kamocha obligates us to feel for someone as if we would feel for ourselves if we were in that situation. And that's why achzarius contains the word zar, a stranger, because it's the feeling of the fact that we feel that this person's a stranger that prevents us from actually getting to that level of feeling. It continues, he says that it used to be that very often after davening, he says in his yeshiva, they would have a tremendous amount of tehillim that was said of recholim. He said basically after every davening, they would say a parak of tehillim. And the tzibur, the congregation, will recite after the chazan and daven. And they have no idea who are they asking, who are they saying the tehillim for? Because it became by route. It just became, they bang on the bima and they said tehillim. And he said it lost its power. They don't understand the essence of the tefillah. So he said that the tehillim became like a masuk. It became, he said, this he's talking about in his great people in his yeshiva, and he was a great leader. He said the fact that they said tehillim too often, it made the tehillim like another part of davening. And Gibel's mind, davening ends with the shir shel yom, shachris, they got it on out. So when you bang on the bima and you want to say tehillim, he said, you look around, I guess in his time it was people looking at their wristwatches. In our time it's people looking at their phones and everything, and they're like, it becomes a load on us. Another 2.5 minutes of davening. So it became like, he calls it a masui. It became a load. And he says, he says, it makes a lot of sense. He said, he's not coming down harsh on them, he said. He said, it's very reasonable. He says that he understands why it became like a load on people. Because that's just the nature of the human. That when things become hergo, when things become normal, it's kemaisa kof ba'alma. It means like a regular simple action. It's like a monkey. You copy, you mimic. It becomes by route. He says that's the nature of the human. We do things without understanding, and he says that therefore when you have an abundance tehillim recited every day, it's possible that we can disconnect from it. And he says it can come to a situation even if you know the person that you're davening for, but because it became so often that the tehillim was recited, it's hard to stop ourselves and get out of the route and break the route. So he says maybe an eitzah will be, he says that Masha Hischalnu Bereshis Hasicha Minyan Amir Tzilim Shomer Manon Velosim Esleiv. He says maybe what we should do is the Chol HaPachas, at least we should try to think at the time that we're saying Tehillim for the Tzoros of Klal Yisrael, think about a particular situation that you know of and direct it to Tehillim even when you're saying it for someone else, but direct it to Tehillim at those feelings. Since perhaps that will be a way to break out of the hergo. But if you think about what he's saying is he's totally relating to us in our situation. He says, I get it. I get why everybody at the end of davening is, when they bang on the bima for the tehillim, it feels like it's a load on their shoulders. Because it becomes by route. It becomes like, this is like something like, okay, we did this already. I think a large part of it is also, is we don't see the results. When you daven, and which is really all we could do for someone that's suffering, is really all we could do is, there's three things, really, the only really two things we could do, besides for obviously physically helping and any actual real help that the person requires. The only other two we could do is any level of feeling that we muster up for that person it sort of gets Hashem, so to speak, more listening. Like the same way Rabbi the same way Hashem, after he heard the tzedakah of Klal Yisrael in Egypt, is when he responded. So the more people that feel for a situation, the more Jews that feel for another Jew. It's collectively, it moves Hashem in a different way. The power of people suffering has an untold force that gets Hashem to respond. So even without davening, even without tefillah, just a simple feeling of wow, this person's going through so much. That simple feeling, even though we don't see it and we're not privy to the way God's ways, and we don't see when God actually responds, and we don't know why when Hashem responds, why He responded. But Chazal tell us that any time that there's tzedakah, any time that there's tsar, Hashem's hands become heavy. And when you could, Kabiyachal, wear Hashem down. If so many people are feeling so sad and so feel the other person's burden, Hashem's hands become so heavy that eventually he's going to have to respond, which is exactly what happened in Mitzrayim. So that's step one, what we could do to help another Jew. We could try to put ourselves in their shoes and feel for their situation, and through feeling for them, collectively, when there's a force of people that feel a certain way, that forces Hashem, so to speak, to respond. We don't see it, we don't know, but it's Chazal are telling us that Hashem responds when there's tzar. The other thing is tefillah. Tefillah has an untold force. The power of tefillah is unimaginable. We find the Gemara tells us that there was a certain city that had in their shul a 7-headed serpent, and they weren't able to get rid of it. And they heard that there was a certain Mora that was coming to town, and the head of the shul, I think it was Rabbi and Yaakov, said, "Don't invite him no one should invite him." He instructed all the townspeople, "Don't invite him into your house to sleep. Let him be forced to sleep in the shul, and let him deal with the serpent, the 7-headed serpent." So the Marsha asks, how was he able to put this other person in that situation? Like, who says an ace will happen? Who says he'll be able to get rid of the serpent? Like don't invite him into your house? It sounds ludicrous. So the Marsha explains that Rabbi knew that he would daven, and through the tefillah, it's for sure through his tefillah that the serpent will go away. So the Marsha says, but what right do you have to empty out someone's chusn? We know anytime there's a shinoi atev, anytime that there's a change of nature, Hashem does it, but it takes away a person's chusn. We only have a certain amount of so to speak, points and credits, and you have no right to put someone in a situation that ulai nischarish nisa, perhaps a nace will occur, but if the nace occurs, you're ruining the guy's brownie points with Hashem. You're taking away his points. You're taking away his credit. So what right do you have to take away his credit? So Marsha explains that tefillah and nisim are not connected. If something happens to tefillah, that's derech hateva. That's nature. A nace is when you rely on nisim tovim, when you rely on other areas and venues to beseech Hashem. But if it's through tefillah, it's not a nace. Because that's the power of tefillah. Hashem conditioned in the world a power of daven to me, pray to me, ask something from me, and then I can respond in a way that doesn't take away your schus, doesn't take away your merits. So tefillah has such an untold power that it's something that we can do for someone else. When there's a situation that occurs and we hear about a situation, if we realize the challenge of the fact that we're creatures of habit, as Dori Cheskel tells us, and he's ein kol kach pella, it's not a pella. It makes sense. We first have to accept the fact that it makes a lot of sense that we're so hardened and we don't feel other people's pain. Once you accept it, so then you can begin to work on it. When we don't accept it, so then it's like okay, whatever. But when we realize that it's a normal thing for a human being to not be conditioned with the proper reactions, and it's a lifetime of work to develop our feelings and to slowly come out of, so to speak, out of our frozen state and allow ourselves to thaw. So then we approach it with a whole different light. We're not looking to all of a sudden be nosi v'olam chaveru, but to slowly make steps towards the direction of thawing and allowing those feelings to come out. So the more we realize the difficulty of it, and we accept the fact that we don't react always in the proper fashion, the easier it is to begin the process of working on it. And the process, it just really takes, like we see Simas Alev, it's really allowing ourselves to think and allowing ourselves to feel and to think about the way Hashem feels for another person that's suffering. And we know our responsibility is always to mimic the ways of God. And through mimicking the ways of Hashem, then we ourselves could become better people. The Chazal also tell us, interesting discussion, this is the Alter account. It says, why do you think all of our forefathers were shepherds? Like they had to choose such a lowly occupation, So he says that he feels, the Alter Rebbe tells us, he feels that the reason why they chose that occupation is because it's a midah of anah, to develop the midah of anava, of humility. Why do they want to develop the midah of humility? He says because a lot of the blockage to feeling for someone else, he says, is gaiva. Is we love ourselves so much and we're so conceited that, and we're so comfortable in our own way that it's very hard for us to break out of the I, right? It's very hard for us to break out of the I generation. It's all about me. And when it's all about me, when something happens to someone else, our first reaction is, oh, at least it's not me. At least it's not I. So that the forefathers want to become shepherds to further develop the midah of anava, that they could then feel more for Klal Yisrael, they could feel for other people. So if you think about that, if that was their reason to become shepherds, it's mind-boggling. Here we have Avram, whose entire house was open to everybody. The Rashi tells us that when the Malachim came to visit Avram Avinu, he didn't know that they were Malachim. He thought they were lowly Arabs. He says, please stop and come into my house because Rashi says. It's my honor. It wasn't just words. Avram really felt that it was his honor to invite them into his house. That he appreciated the galus, the greatness of every Jew, of every human actually. He wasn't known as the Jews then. But he appreciated the greatness of every person, and he felt it was truly his honor to allow them to come into his house and to invite them in. So Avram Avinu, with all those feelings, he needs to be a shepherd to further develop feelings for other people. Apparently, because that concept of those feelings existing to the highest level, to make them effective leaders, it took actions of working on it and developing it, as far as allowing them, taking time to be shepherds. Because through the outward action of a lowly occupation of shepherding animals, they're able to further develop the midah of anava. So we see from this Alter Rebbe another potential blockage, that when we're very into my situation, the I, that's a blockage for someone else. Because anything that happens out of our realm of our circle, anything that happens out of our comfort zone, so our immediate reaction is, hey, it's not me, it doesn't affect me, it's not my city, it's not my town, it's not my family, it's someone else's situation. So when it's someone else's situation, then it's okay. So part of what has to happen is to realize that it's not all about us, it's not all about our situation, we're all here together, it's about everyone's situation. You know, the Mesilas, it's a little scary, but the Mesilas Yesharim tells us one of his proofs to the fact that there obviously is a higher purpose and a deeper meaning to life than just living for the purpose of pleasure and for the purpose of this world. But there must be that there's a neshama min al-yona, that there's something endowed within us that's connected to a higher purpose, which is obviously our belief. He says, I'll prove it to you. But he says, look around the world, he says. Look at people's situations. It's echad mini elef. It's 1 in 1,000 that have a peachy, everything's so peachy and everything's perfect. He says, you look around, this one has this one has that. Anywhere you look, and as you get older, you know, I always wonder in the past, like, 3-4 years, like, is it just because I'm older that I know more, or are more things really happening? But like when you look around, he says, it can't be that this world is for this world. Because look at everyone's life. And the Stipler expounds on this in Mesilas Yesharim, and he just goes through, you know, from his chair in Bnei Brak, what he was, and the amount of people that came through his door, he just starts rattling off millions of situations. He says everybody has something. There's basically unfortunately no one in this world that doesn't have a time in their life that they have to deal with a challenge. So it's a little backwards, but you know, to combat the it's not me, but like listen, we all hope and pray that we're always okay and everything's good, but we can't always be so comfortable. We can't always be so like every time it's not my situation. Because it's echad mini elef, it's really 1 in 1,000 that I think that's a way of saying that it's basically everybody has a time in their life that there's something that's difficult. And the more we realize that the difficulty is something that we all have to feel for the other person, and no one's immune from it, no one's free from it. It's something that, we're not in Israel fighting in the army, we're here and we're safer, we're in a more comfortable area, it's basically relatively safe. But at the end of the day, there are people out there in the front lines that are fighting, and their lives every day are there, on the front lines, and that's in the war, or anything that's going to occur in the future. We have to start realizing that there are brothers and there are sisters. There are third hands. It's not them, it's not someone else, it's not a different situation. It's really our situation. And the more we can break away from the I and the me and start realizing that it's all of us collectively, and it's not so much that we have to do. Any degree of feeling that we muster up for someone else forces Hashem to respond, and it makes the Shekhinah cry out. My hands are heavy. So it's like we have such a power that's within us. Like the Ran tells us by written Rosh Hashanah. The Ran tells us that when it comes to the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, every single Jew should feel as if Kol Olam Talibo, as if the entire world is dependent upon him. So the Gemara says. So the Ran explains, how could we feel that the entire world is dependent upon us? So he says, imagine if it's Mechsa Beinim and it's Mechsa Rishon. If it's half the world, half the scale is tilted one way, and the other half is equal. So you could be the person that makes you the difference. Because if you tilt it towards disgust, then the whole judgment on the world changes. Can you imagine the power of one Jew? One little kid can make a difference in the entire judgment of the world. Because if the scale's even, and you do a notorious act, that's it. The scale changes. So the Ran learns that a person should view himself as if the entire world is dependent upon him. It's literal. It really means what it means. There's the power that we have through anything that we do to affect the din in Shemayim is so amazing, and we can't underestimate it. A lot of times, it's, we think, how much am my Tehillim going to do? Is it really going to make a difference? Who am I? What am I? And it's a very hard feeling to break out of, because it's true. Who am I? What am I? But when you realize it's not you, it's what you're saying that has the power. It's every single Jew has a power within them that if they daven, it doesn't make a difference what you are, what you're doing. Your tefillah at that time, like we find by Yishmael, Kasher Usham, Hashem judged him where he was at that moment. We all have that power of Kasher Usham within us. If for a moment we're able to muster up a little bit of kavanah and tefillah and daven for the other person's situation, that has an unbelievable force and a power that we can't underestimate. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, tries to get us in a state of yish. Nah, what are you worth? You're not worth anything. So you feel for the person, big deal. So you're going to daven, you're going to say a little tehillim, man, what's that going to do? But if we break out of that and realize that there's an awesome power that's embedded within every word of tefillah that we recite on someone else's behalf, every kapitel tehillim that we recite, even if it's just the words, even without feeling, the power of David HaMelech's words and the power of beseeching Hashem is mind-boggling, and we don't know the results, but it's true. Chazal tell us it's true, so it's true. So we break out of the mode of we can't do anything. You could do something. You could be in your living room, you could hear a situation, you could take out a Sefer Tehillim, you could say one Kapitel Tehillim, you'll never know what difference it made. There's a different Chazal that tell us any tear that was shed, Hashem takes that tear and puts it in a jar, so to speak, collects it and keeps it by him. It's there. It's making an impact. It's affecting. It's changing worlds. You have no idea with your tefillah, with your ma'asim tovim, with anything that you do to respond to that situation, the power that lies within it. So we shouldn't underestimate our abilities. Our abilities are just as great as the greatest people alive. The Chazal, the Sforno explains it by Lavan. When Lavan gives a bracha, says, "Atia berachas heter kala beinecha." So he explains the reason why is because if at that moment Lavan was able to remove, he said Lavan was able to remove all of his impurities and give the bracha from his heart. So Lavan was the Rasha, right? The Haggadah tells us that Lavan was in a certain way worse than Paro. So, but at that moment that he gave the bracha, he was able to remove the impurity and give it from his heart. So he says that's really what a bracha from a tzaddik is. It's not a magical force. It's just because it came from a pure source. So it has a stronger power. So if any time that we're moved, if we can act upon those feelings for another Jew, and we take that moment that we're moved, if we wait too long, it's going to dissipate, it's going to disappear, because that's the nature of a human being, which what the Orei Cheskel tells us, ain't kol kach bala, that as time goes on, as things wear off, we tend to forget about it, we put it behind us. But if we can take the moment that we actually have a feeling, and we act on it, so that feeling that we're saying at that moment is coming from a pure source, and is contained with even a more of a powerful force within us. So again, we shouldn't underestimate what we're capable of doing for a fellow Jew. We're capable of completely changing a person's situation. We won't see that we did it, but we believe that we could. And therefore, the more you believe it, the more we put into it and invest within it. So it's feeling and it's tefillah that really is the way we could act on any time that we hear situations that occur and are able to muster up a feeling for it, and then to go ahead and say Tehillim for it. It's untold what power and force lies within that.
Thank you.